All right, let's jump right into today's professional development explainer. We're going to break down the foundational psychological perspectives of human learning. Our main goal here is to help you refine your teaching methodologies and deliberately build out a teaching toolkit that actively supports the way human beings actually learn. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit the language learning challenge, look at behavioral perspectives, unpack cognitive psychology, dive into social constructivism, and finally bring it all together to build out your ultimate teaching toolkit. Section 1, the language learning challenge. Let's kick things off by looking at the absolute bare-bones steps needed to teach, well, pretty much anything. And to do this, we're going to look a little bit outside the human experience. To get our baseline, let's look at a kind of funny example from the source material. Picture a 10-year-old kid named Ethan, right? And he's trying to teach his adopted mynah bird, Myra, how to talk. So, barring sending Ethan's parents to therapy, how do we actually help him tackle this systematically? Well, this situation actually nails the 4 universal steps of teaching literally any subject. First step, you have to specify entry behavior, like what does the learner already know? Second, you've got to formulate your specific goals. Third, devise training methods customized to hit those goals. And fourth, design an evaluation to see if any of it actually stuck. Now, teaching a bird to mimic noises is a fun little thought experiment. But human learning, especially acquiring a second language, yeah, that's a whole different ballgame. It really demands that we as educators deeply understand exactly how human beings process information so we can design our methods properly. So to wrap our heads around that sheer complexity, we can actually map human learning into 3 massive buckets, or perspectives. You've got the behavioral perspective, which is all about the physical, then the cognitive perspective, which zooms in on the mental, and finally, the social-constructivist perspective, which tackles the socio-affective domain. Section 2, behavioral perspectives and rewards. Let's rewind a bit and see how early 20th century behavioral psychology completely shaped the language classrooms we used to see. For the first half of the 20th century, behaviorism basically ran the show. Think B.F. Skinner on operant conditioning. His whole thing was that human behavior is heavily governed by consequences. Specifically, if you reward an action with a positive reinforcer, you strengthen it, making it way more likely to happen again. And here's why that matters for us. That massive focus on physical repetition and building habits directly gave birth to the audiolingual method, or ALM. You might know it as the old Army method from World War II. ALM totally ditched explicit grammar rules and instead went all in on intense pattern drills, rote repetition, and immediate rewards to literally build physical language habits. I want you to really think about this for your own classroom for a second. Think about Thorndike and Skinner's obsession with giving immediate reinforcement right after a student does something right. What specific responses do you use to reward and reinforce your students when they stick their necks out to use a new language? Moving on to Section 3, cognitive psychology and meaning. We're stepping away from those purely physical drills and diving straight into the highly mental realm of cognitive psychology. Enter David Oswell, a big name in educational cognitive psychology. He looked at learning totally differently, not as repeating a physical habit, but as a deeply meaningful mental process. Think of it like giving your students mental pegs. Every time they hit a new vocab word or grammar rule, they are actively associating it with and hanging it on a cognitive structure that's already in their brain. So if you take Oswell's approach, your goals as a teacher completely shift. You aren't just drilling phrases anymore. You are actively helping students acquire real meaning and retain info by associating it with stuff they already know. You're helping them organize knowledge hierarchically. And the huge payoff here? By making the learning deeply relatable, you stop systemic forgetting dead in its tracks. So ask yourself right now, how are you actively helping your students build those mental pegs? Like, what specific tricks, rules, or weird little mnemonic devices do you give them so they don't just dump everything they learned the second they walk out your door? All right, Section 4, social constructivism and empowerment. Now we're bringing emotion, social interaction, and the whole person right into the spotlight. Heavy hitters like Carl Rogers, Paulo Freire, and Lev Vygotsky really drove the social constructivist movement. They argued, hey, learning isn't just about mental pegs or physical drills. You've got to treat the student as a whole person, a complex, emotional human being. Rogers basically said that if you drop the dictatorial teacher act, become a caring facilitator, and build a non-defensive environment that actually cares about their feelings, the cognitive learning, it'll just naturally follow. And that exact philosophy sparked community language learning, or CLL. It's a wildly different setup where the teacher acts way more like a counselor. The classroom transforms into this super supportive, low-anxiety community. Students actually initiate the language they want to use and slowly, safely transition from totally depending on you to being completely autonomous. Take a quick second to reflect on this prompt from our source text. Have you ever actually seen these learner-centered ideas play out? Like, have you had moments where you negotiate the learning outcomes directly with your students, letting them engage in discovery rather than feeling defensive or super competitive? Which brings us to Section 5, Building Your Teaching Toolkit. Let's pull all these threads together and see how this actually builds out your professional development. If there's one massive takeaway from our source material today, it's this. The absolute best teachers aren't dogmatic. They don't just pick one theory and ignore the rest. Look, the audiolingual method had its flaws, right? And so did community language learning with all its frustrating trial and error. The real magic happens when educators become eclectically judicious. You purposely cherry-pick the absolute best tasks from ALM, CLL, and cognitive strategies to perfectly fit the exact moment and the exact student sitting in front of you. So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on before your next lesson plan. When you look at your classroom right now, today, which of these psychological lenses is running the show? Are you leaning heavily into being a Skinnerian driller, an Ausubelian meaning maker, or a Rogersian counselor? And most importantly, what specific tools from the other perspectives are you going to add tomorrow to build the ultimate eclectic learning experience? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy teaching.